Behind every website or app, there are two parts working together, the front end and the back end. The front end is everything you see on the web page, and the back end is what stores and manages all the data behind the scenes. For example, think about YouTube for a second. When you open the app, you see videos, thumbnails, and recommendations. That's the front end, and the back end keeps track of your watch history, which videos you liked, saving uploads, and deciding which video to show you next. In this video, we're going to explore how the back end of a website works, step by step, starting from the very basics and building up the full picture. Let's say you're watching a video on YouTube. Everything looks good, so you click the like button. Now the real question is, what actually happens next? Let's break it down from the ground up. Any computer that's connected to the internet, whether it's your laptop or your phone, can send a message to another computer that's also connected to the internet. So to keep things simple, let's say YouTube has a computer running somewhere in one of their data centers. When you click the like button on a video, your device sends a message across the internet to that YouTube computer saying that you liked the video. In this situation, your computer, the one sending the message, is called the client, and YouTube's computer, the one receiving the message, is called the server. But here's the important part. Computers don't automatically know how to handle these messages. We have to teach them. That's where back-end programming languages come in. They turn computers into servers that can receive and respond to requests. Popular back-end languages include JavaScript, Python, Ruby, and Java. But writing everything using just a raw programming language takes a lot of code to set up a backend. To make life easier, developers use backend frameworks. A framework is like a starter kit that gives you pre-built tools for common tasks, such as handling requests, sending responses, and organizing your code. Each backend programming language comes with a few different frameworks that we can choose from. For example, if you're using JavaScript, Express is the most popular framework. For Python, there's Django. Ruby has Ruby on Rails, and Java commonly uses Spring. But frameworks aren't the only thing we rely on in the backend. We also use a lot of code that other developers have already written. These pieces of code are called packages, and they help us handle common tasks, like making HTTP requests, connecting to a database, or setting up user login and authentication. A backend project can use dozens or even hundreds of these packages, so in order to install them and keep them organized easily, we use something called Package Manager. Each programming language has its own package manager. JavaScript uses NPM, Python uses pip, Ruby uses bundler, and Java uses Maven. Together, a programming language, a framework, and a package manager form the foundation of most backend servers. Once our server is running, we still have a major problem to solve. Where do we store the data? Going back to YouTube, data includes user accounts, videos, comments, watch histories, subscriptions, and millions of other pieces of information. For this, we use a database. A database is software designed specifically to store, organize, and retrieve data efficiently. It usually runs on a separate computer, and our backend server communicates with it whenever data needs to be saved or loaded. Some of the most common databases you'll hear about are PostgreSQL, MySQL, and MongoDB. At the simplest level, you can build most of your projects with just a server and a database. Here's how our YouTube example might work. When you write a comment under a video and press submit, the front end sends a message to the back end containing the comment and the video it belongs to. The back end receives that message, saves the comment in the database, and then sends a response back confirming that the comment was created. This back and forth communication is called a request-response cycle, and this is generally how web applications work. Sometimes different front ends communicate with the same back end. For example, the YouTube mobile app and the YouTube website look different, but they both might rely on the same back-end system. When you post a comment from the mobile app, the app sends a request to the backend. When you read comments on the website sends a request to the same backend. The backend then fetches the comments from the database and sends them back. Different front ends, same backend, same data. Now that we understand the overall flow, let's take a closer look at what's actually inside one of these requests. A request usually contains the data we care about, such as the comment text, the video ID, and the user who wrote the comment. At the top of the request, there are a few important details that describe where the request is going and what action it represents. One of these details is the domain name. YouTube owns the domain youtube.com and has configured it so that any request sent to that domain is routed to their backend servers. That's how the request knows where to go. Another important part is the HTTP method, sometimes called an HTTP verb. This describes what kind of action we're trying to perform. Common HTTP methods include post, get, put, and delete. Along with the method, the request includes a URI path, The URI path identifies the resource we're working with. For example, a post request to a URI path like /comments means we want to create a new comment. A GET request to /comments means we want to read existing comments, usually for a specific video. In the backend, we use our programming language and Backend Framework to define which combinations of HTTP methods and URI paths are allowed and how they should be handled. For instance, we can define logic that says, when a post request comes in to /comments, the backend should create a new comment and save it to the database. When a GET request comes in to /comments, the backend should retrieve comments from the database and send them back as a response. When a delete request comes in, the backend should remove the specified comment. This complete set of allowed requests is called an API, which stands for Application Programming Interface. The API defines how the frontend is allowed to interact with the backend. If the request doesn't match any of the rules defined in the API, the backend will respond with an error. Once an API exists, an important decision is how it's designed overall. API design approaches help keep systems consistent, scalable, and easier to work with as applications grow. One of the most common design approaches is REST, Representational State Transfer. It is one of the most common API design approaches and is built around a stateless communication model where each request is independent and contains all the information needed to process it. This makes REST flexible and scalable. There are also other approaches like GraphQL and gRPC, each designed to solve different kinds of problems. In real-world systems, the choice depends on the product, the scale, and the kind of experience you want to build. If you want to explore these popular approaches in more detail, you can check out my detailed video linked in the description. Now, let's talk about infrastructure. These days, companies usually don't buy their own servers. Instead, they rent computers from cloud providers like Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, and Microsoft Azure. This idea is called cloud computing. The basic idea behind cloud computing is simple. Instead of buying and managing physical computers yourself, you rent computing power from a cloud provider. This model is known as infrastructure as a service. Companies like AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure operate massive data centers filled with powerful machines. Inside their systems, these machines are split into many smaller virtual computers using software. These virtual computers are called virtual machines, or VMs. To run a website, a common setup is to rent one VM for your backend server and another VM for your database. But traffic on the internet isn't constant. If your application suddenly becomes popular and starts receiving a lot of requests, a single server may not be enough. With cloud computing, you can create multiple VMs running the same backend code and place a load balancer in front of them. The load balancer's job is to distribute incoming requests evenly, so no single server gets overwhelmed. When traffic drops again, those extra VMs can be shut down, which means you only pay for what you actually use. This flexibility is one of the biggest advantages of cloud computing compared to owning physical servers. However, managing virtual machines, scaling them up and down, and configuring load balancers still takes time and effort. To simplify this, cloud providers offer another model called Platform as a Service, or PaaS. With PaaS, you don't manage servers directly at all. You upload your backend code, and the platform automatically handles server creation, scaling, load balancing, and integration for you. Platforms like Versal, AWS Elastic Beanstalk, and Google App Engine fall into this category. As systems grow larger, another architectural pattern often comes into play: microservices. Instead of having one large backend that handles everything, the system is split into multiple smaller backends, each responsible for a specific task. Each service can use a different programming language, framework, or database depending on what fits best. For instance, a comments service might use JavaScript with MongoDB, while a payments service might use Java with Postgres. This keeps each codebase smaller, more focused, and easier to maintain, especially as teams and applications scale. Sometimes you don't even need to build a microservice yourself. Many companies provide ready-made backend services that you can integrate directly into your application. These services expose APIs that handle complex functionality, like sending emails, processing payments, or analyzing data. This model is called Software as a Service, or SaaS. Instead of managing your own infrastructure or microservices for these features, your backend simply sends requests to the SaaS provider and uses the results. Together, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service form the foundation of modern cloud computing. Most applications today rely on a combination of these approaches to run scalable, reliable backends without having to own or manage physical servers themselves. Finally, there are additional backend tools that come into play as a website grows. Primary databases like Postgres and MySQL work well for structured data, but they aren't designed to store large files like images or videos. For that, we can use a blob storage service like AWS S3, paired with a CDN like CloudFront to store and deliver user-uploaded content. As traffic grows, a cache like Redis can help reduce database load and keep responses fast. And for tasks that need to run later, we can use a message broker like RabbitMQ along with a background worker to process them asynchronously, including delayed or scheduled execution. Of course, there are many other technologies that can serve the same purposes, so it's always worth exploring and doing your own research. If you're just starting out, knowing how to use servers, databases, backend frameworks, and cloud hosting is enough. Other technologies are added depending on the kind of features you're building. Thanks for watching. This was Code Wrap, and if you found this helpful, consider subscribing for more videos like this. See you in the next one.